there should be a study done. It's like the earlier in the conversation somebody tells you how many winks he has, the less you think you should think of him as a quarterback. Right? Like,
welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Tuesday, April the 23rd. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined as always by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. And we are also joined today by a special guest, friend of the show, Sean McEvoy. I almost said Sean Maccabee. I don't know where that came from. Sean McEvoy.
I'll take it.
A quarterback coach to the Stars. Sean, besides me butchering your name, aren't you so glad to be here with us?
Well, you guys really know how to make a guy feel welcome. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Like, we can barely remember your name, but we love having you around here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You guys couldn't wait to get me back. What's his name? No, great to be here as always, fellas. This is it's always nice to be a repeat guest on the show. And I know I've been with you guys quite a handful of times now. So always good to be back, talk quarterbacks. And
yeah, man,
it's draft week. So I'm excited as I know you guys are as well.
It is draft week. And so we had you on, of course, last year for our quarterback episode. We said we got to do it again because I don't know anybody better to talk quarterbacks with than, a guy that's telling these pros how to do things. Like, that seems like a pretty reliable source. So we're going to get in. And Malik Willis, who are a couple of guys you've spent a decent amount of time with this spring in their offseason training. We'll hear about where they are in their progress, and then we're going to dive into the top 10 quarterbacks in this year's draft class, the last of our 11-part positional series. So relieved to be getting that checked off and done finally. Before we do that, a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you're with us here live on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. We'd love for you to be a part of today's conversation over on the YouTube page. So go to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, find this live stream there, and in the comment section, that's where you can be a part of today's conversation. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit like, do all those things that help us with the algorithm. It's very helpful to us, and it's just a couple of clicks of the button for you. So help us out there and hit retweet on Twitter if you can. Sean, let's dive right into and I forgot to mention our article that came out today. JT, hello, burying the lead. A big article we had coming out, the do and don't draft guide for the Tennessee Titans. It's out there for you to read, and we went through half of it on yesterday's live show, which is out now on podcast form and all the forms. So if you want to listen to it, you can listen to the most recent show in this feed, or if you want the full thing, which we only talked about like half of it on the podcast, read it over on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. It is 75 do and do not draft prospects, guys that we think would and would not be a good fit for the Tennessee Titans in each round at each position. It's comprehensive. It's your draft reading guide. I recommend reading it before the draft and then following along during the draft so that you know about some of these guys that are going to go when, where, why, and how. Okay, so that's all the advertising we have to do. Now, Sean, let's talk about these guys that are current Tennessee Titans. Aren't, this team is not in the same situation as it was last year, whereas, do they take a quarterback? Do they not? Obviously, they have their guy at least for the foreseeable future in Will Levis. They'll be giving him a year or two, I'd imagine. And you've spent some time with him this offseason. So what's been going on? What's the 411 on Will Levis this spring, his first true NFL offseason, not having to do the whole draft rigmarole?
Yeah, I think when we talked about this last year, too, with Malik going into the second year, it's like so nice to just have a structure and a plan where you feel like all your attention and focus is on the right things, right? I mean, there's so much showboating in the draft process and having to kind of do these other things that maybe aren't in conjunction with you developing and working on your game on the field and preparing you for success, right? So it's this weird like juxtaposition of like, I gotta, make these guys like me, but I wish I was working on my craft kind of deal. So I think there's obviously that of like, all right, I have a full off season. I can figure out what my structure, what my plan, what my schedule needs to look like, and then attack the things that I want to work on, either from a self-evaluation standpoint or things that my new coaching staff has told me. And then now Will has also the extra assurance that he's the guy, right? That, hey, you're the guy. We're building this thing around you. We're going to do everything we can to make you specifically be in a situation to have the most success. And so there's a lot of confidence that any quarterback would feel. And I think that's where Will is right now. And like I said, Will and Malik, everybody, all quarterbacks really around the league all kind of have their support system. if you will, and that usually is made up at this level of a lot of different people. So obviously, I don't want to overstate it. Will still spend some time in California with Jordan Palmer. He has a movement coach that he works with based out of Canada. And then when he's in Tennessee, he does some stuff with me as well, right? So don't want to overstate that. And just like Malik works with Quincy Avery, spent some time with Tom Gramelli and Will Hewlett down in Jacksonville, and then myself as well. So everyone's got their team, and we're all just kind of here to support whatever they need. But really where they've been now is just they've identified those 2 or 3 things, and a lot of it has been this new coaching staff coming in, rewatching their film from the previous year or two, and maybe identifying some weaknesses that wasn't identified with the prior coaching staff, or at least putting a little bit more emphasis on, hey, for you to get to where I need you to be, let's work on these things. And that's what those guys have been attacking.
When quarterbacks are given the opportunity to start their rookie season, there's always this significant pressure, palpable pressure they feel, going from year 1 to year 2. It's always talking about what's that year 2 jump going to look like? Because we see it in the best guys. And a part of that is pressure we put on them. But I think the reason we see it so often is because, again, when you, especially when you're one of the top draft prospects, and obviously Will ended up falling to 33 just out of the first round, the entire draft process, he was considered one of the he's a top tier quarterback group, potentially a top 10 pick. That was the way that he was paraded around. And so there was a whole lot that went along with that, meeting with Tom Brady and getting pictures over dinner and, being one of the top guys at the combine, doing as much media as you can possibly do during the draft cycle. So many different distractions from the actual, I doubt there's a whole lot of actual football going on during that draft process. And so, what does it look like? Do you notice when guys get that first chance in the league to have, suddenly their schedule they look at once the season's over and holy cow, I feel like I have so much time for the first time in, when you're a star quarterback in college and then you have the entire spring draft process all laid out for you, and then your rookie year, I'd imagine it feels like you have free time or, time to structure the way you want to for the first time in over 18 months of your life.
I think that's it. I think we talk about that senior year or whatever your last year of college before you enter the draft through that rookie year is like a 19-month straight, no stopping, all football, nothing else situation. It's just the way it goes. You get drafted and you're at rookie mini camp 4 days later, right? So so this is the first time where you get to reset, you get to take a breath, and like I said, I think it gives you the time to do maybe some self-reflection that you weren't able to do before. And I think it allows you to maybe confirm how you want to handle things going forward. Maybe there was something you did last offseason that you think you can do better, and you bring in different people and different tools and you attack things differently. But I do think that just the mental of take a deep breath, reset, maybe get away, maybe take a week and go to an island somewhere, or, whatever guys want to do to relax, spend some time with your family and that kind of thing. And then, decide when is it all football all the time? How am I going to work myself to get in ready for, off-season workouts? Obviously, you're making a new impression on the new coaching staff, and then be ready for OTAs and everything moving forward. So I think there's not a QB that I've ever been around that didn't enjoy the break from year 1 to year 2 a lot more than the pre-draft process in the rookie year.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So with Will and Malik, I obviously want to focus on Will here because he's the presumed starter.
Sure.
What does it when he meets with you this offseason and from what you have garnered, the way that he's approaching his offseason, are there certain things in his game from a fundamental standpoint that he is wanting to highlight, that he's wanting to rep, some things he's wanting to change about the way that he approaches the position? What can you share along the actual progress, in terms of getting better? What along those lines has he done this spring?
Yeah. So without getting into specifics, because I like to that's kind of his information.
Absolutely.
He decides to share with what the coach had communicated to him. But, what was good for our relationship was I got to know Will last offseason when he came in and first got drafted. So then, okay, there's a confidence, comfort level between us. I'm not just Malik's QB coach, who's not out to help him, right? You get that. So now you get to that point, that relationship's been built. So really, when I saw him for the first time, probably February, when the guys got together, it was, hey, what are you focused on? What are you working on? And I like the way Will kind of has his process, right? Because he's very self-assured in the things that he's comfortable doing and that he does well. And he's very self-critical in the areas that he didn't feel like he played a high level. I know he shared that in post-game conferences and in some of the interviews he's done since last season, right? He felt like he could have played better. He felt like he could have protected the ball better. He felt like some of his footwork and just being ready to throw at the top of the drop and making sure his eyes were in the right place when routes were open. I think those were things I've heard him talk about already. And that was like things along those lines is kind of the list he gave me, right? Like, hey, this is what I'm focused on this offseason. And that's great. Because like I said, if I'm going to be with him, 6 or 8 different throwing sessions, and he's going to be with Jordan Palmer a couple times, and he's going to work with Rob up in camp, the fact that everyone understands what he's focused on, and then we're putting all our efforts into that area is really the best way to do it for a quarterback. Like I said, we're not going into specifics, but I think what has been the most helpful, and I think what Will's excited about, is he's had conversations with this new coaching staff, with Brian Callahan, with Nick, with Bo, and going through film was, I think, raised his confidence in the things that he thought he did well, and he's getting that feedback that, yeah, we agree with you, we're seeing the same thing. And then I think he's getting hey, look at this clip, look at this throw. These is where we want you to focus. And I think that meshed up with what he was thinking too. Does that make sense? So when you get that reassurance, like your head's in the right place, you're focused on the right things, go attack that. There's just a conviction in your off-season process that really pays dividends going forward.
The answer to this question might be no. I just have to move on abruptly. But did you spend any time around either of those guys during the part of this offseason when it became apparent, oh, Mike Vrabel is out and there's going to be a new guy, and then here's this new guy that was brought in? And if so, what can you share about how they processed and maybe approached that transition?
Yeah, more Malik than Will.
Okay,
because we're talking like that end of the season. I saw Will during the season, obviously, and then didn't see Will again in person probably until the beginning of February, I want to say.
Okay.
So that time I didn't talk to Will. Obviously,
Sure.
Malik I did because we talk, frequently every other day, that kind of thing. And it was always like, we went through the process like everyone else did. Like, these rumors, what is this? Like, could this really happen? Like, could they move on from Coach Vrabel?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, then you find out, and it's like, oh my God, did you hear? And the reality is like, I think a lot of the guys in the building are so insulated from that. So like every time I would talk to Malik, or I'm thinking about past situations with other quarterbacks that I talk with frequently and their coaching changes that have happened, it almost feels like they're the last one to know. And it's because they're not in the world of social media like we are, right? We're not like updating to get the next alert, and like reading every tweet Schefter puts out. Like, that's not the world those guys live in. If I remember correctly, Malik showed up in the building for his end of the year exit interview, and Vrabel had been let go like 6 hours earlier, right? So it's kind of like, oh, I don't think you're going to be doing that exit interview today, right? Like that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, that's got to be a weird day for a player when you think
like
you're wrapping it up, and then
you're going through your normal process, and like, hey, I'm excited to meet with the coaches. Let me get some feedback. What are they seeing? What do they want me to focus on? Right, that's a big part of how you set that plan for your off season. And then knowing that, like, hey, this thing happened, and like I said, Malik knew it was in the realm of possibility, as I'm sure Will did, as I'm sure a lot of those players in the building did. But I don't think there was any advance notice over what kind of anybody else or any fan got in that process. And I think they found out the way they found out.
Wow.
Then there's the process of, okay, well, who's going to be our new coach, and all the rumors that circulate with that as well. And, even with Will, I don't think any of those guys were really privy to who that person was going to be, prior to maybe 24 hours before the decision was made. So.
And then they make the decision to bring in Brian Callahan. And I imagine both of those guys have had a chance to acquaint themselves with him. And I've spoken with him a couple of times, and it's always, it's rainbows and sunshine and unicorns. And, before you actually do the coaching part, you can't lose until you actually go out there and lose.
Sure.
That being said, there is a level of excitement, I think, amongst fans, and I'd imagine it's shared by players, at least on the offensive side of the ball.
100%.
This modernity that he's bringing to the locker room, to the field, to the way that they're going to approach a game plan. What was the reaction to the perceived style this team is going to be taking on now?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you're bringing an offensive-minded coach, and I think if you're an offensive player, that brings excitement. You're bringing a coach that has had success with, if I'm thinking just about Malik and Will and Mason in this situation, with Joe Burrow and other quarterbacks prior, right? And so here's a guy that has had success with other quarterbacks, puts them in situations to be successful. And like you said, it's just a more modern style offense, right? So if the QBs feel like, hey, maybe we'll open things up a little bit more, maybe we'll pass a little bit more on first and second down and things of that nature, maybe it allows me to get into a rhythm. Maybe, quarterbacks are excited about quarterback coaches, right? Does that make sense? Like quarterback minded guys, right? And that's across the board. So when you get a guy with Callahan and his experience coaching that position, you get a guy like Bo's played that position, right? And, is a younger coach and gaining his experience, but a guy that they can relate to and has been, behind the center, if you will. That's what QBs like. They know there's a guy they can relate to, a guy that's going to put them in position to be successful. And like I said, with Will coming in this year, knowing he's the guy, and everything you've heard from Brian to this point, Coach Callahan, is we're just going to set him up for success. We're going to figure out what he does well. If he doesn't like something, we're not going to use that, right? And this ownership that they're going to allow, Will obviously, but to some extent the entire quarterback room maybe individually has different type plans that work for them in case they are needed to play. Not to compare everything to what was there previously, but I think they're just excited about what that's going to look like moving forward.
Absolutely. I've asked you this question before, but now that you've had a full year to be around Levis and acquaint yourself with Will and really get, I feel like, be in a position to answer this question better. I'm going to ask you again. Yeah. You've been around a wide array of different quarterback talents in your time, guys that were never going to pan out in the NFL to guys that are currently NFL stars. And you know what that looks like when you're not on the field, when you know what that looks like up close and personal in a throwing session in April. With certain guys, I'd imagine you could probably just tell after spending 5 minutes around the guy whether or not it's going to work or not. And having spent time around Will Levis, what impression, and I want this to be a 2-part answer. The first being really having nothing to do with his play on the field, but the way that he carries himself, because that's an important part of playing quarterback in the NFL. The perception from the outside to me is that he, may just physically never pan out. He may never be able to play the game. But I have no doubt, based on what I've seen, that he has all of the intangibles, all of the stuff you need between the ears, the mentality in the locker room, in spring, in his own training, to be an elite quarterback. If the rest pans out, is that the impression that you get getting to know the guy?
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, when we talked on this podcast last year, about what the guy I thought of these guys coming draft, we talked about Will, and I didn't know Will. I'd never met him personally. And so, so now you have a whole different view of the guy. But sure, I mean, like I said before, he's very kind of specific, very detailed about what he's there to do, what his job is at hand. So if we come out for a throwing session, and the way these go, the quarterbacks are running that show anyway, right? So if it's just Malik and 7 of the Titans receivers, Malik's running the show. All attention's on him. That's his program. If Malik and Will are both out there, they both run it. No different than when Ryan would jump in with Malik last year, right? So, but what you see with Will is he has a plan on, these are the specific things that I want to focus on this session. These are the throws I want to make. There's an opportunity in the offseason where the coaches can communicate that directly to the QBs, and then the QBs can then be the coach on the field, right? That's the way it works. And so he's definitely like a down to business, no wasted time type, which I like, right? I mean, that's what you want. That's what you expect. It's like, hey, especially when you're trying to get these guys, these receivers, tight ends, running backs during the offseason to come out and spend an hour and a half. Quarterbacks want to throw every day, right?
Yeah.
They love working on their stuff.
Mhm.
Sometimes the other skill positions can find other things to do that makes a little bit more fun and interesting for them.
Sure.
So those guys I'm sure appreciate, like, hey, we're getting there. This is the time. QBs are going to get there 30 minutes early because they're going to do their plyo and warm up and get their shoulders ready and whatever. Receivers, you come at this time. We're on the field. We'll do drills. Now we're into routes. Boom. Let's get our work done and get home. So Bill's very matter of fact that way. And like I said, very self-critical. I didn't like those 2 throws. Come over to me because I'll be filming some stuff. He wants to look at the video. He wants to look at his footwork. He wants to, hey, did I pull off? Did I lean a little bit on that one? Were my hips not open enough on that throw to the left? And that's why maybe I missed. All right, let me see the video. Yep, that's why I felt it. Have that little conversation. Get back to the next rep. Does that make sense? So, like, really intentional about what he's focused on.
It sounds like that competitiveness and that moxie that you see from the outside. That's just who the guy is.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, I think the self-critical piece is such a important thing for a QB to have, right? It's like, because some guys, it's so easy to like only be focused on the 3-4 things you think you did well. I'm great. I had this, do those couple touchdowns, or that session. How about those 6 great throws I had?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who would more like fixate on the 4 missed throws he had over a session than the 70 great ones he had. Does that make sense? And it's that consistent drive to continue to get better. Like I said, he is in a position now where he's the quarterback 1 of the Titans, no doubt about it. They hired a coaching staff to make him have success this year and put him in that position. He is in the pole position that you can be in if you're a quarterback in the NFL. And he's working like he's still QB3 coming out of preseason, trying to get himself on the field. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of admirable stuff about the way he works, for sure.
All right, and so here's part 2 of the question, and it's the last question we're gonna broach with Levis and with the Titans before we get into the top 10 quarterbacks in this draft class. It may be difficult for you to approach this from an objective standpoint, but I need you to be as objective as you possibly can.
Sure.
In your time as a quarterback coach, as somebody that has evaluated a variety of talents, what did you make of Will Levis's abbreviated time as a starter last year? What do you make of him from a mechanical, physical standpoint in your throwing sessions in the spring?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think a reasonable expectation is for him in the next year or two? And maybe is there a thing or two that you look at and you say, if he can just figure that out, it's going to be a problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought his performance last year was slightly above average, right? I think there were some really good moments.
A lot of ups and downs, very up and down.
Very high.
Yep.
Then there was a lot of like not good enough quarterback play, right? I think we agree with that. So now
I'd imagine he'd be the first to tell you that.
And that's right. And that's what he owns that too. I think the biggest thing is you saw the moments. We've had this conversation, right? Malik had opportunities his rookie year. There weren't moments where you were like, oh, there's the flashes. I didn't see it on the field, right?
Yep.
Maybe you saw it in preseason. I'm sure some guys saw it in practice, but you didn't see it if we're calling those 3 game opportunities. That's fair. Will, whether you think he played great or you thought he was terrible last year, at least you saw those flash moments of good, competent quarterback play, and not just the Atlanta game, because I think you can break down those throws and, okay, those are double move, kind of play action, scripted, take a shot.
Right.
You probably get more out of him working through a progression, avoiding pressure, and having to read a defense to make a play, which you saw some of that. I actually got more out of the Pittsburgh game than I thought I saw in Atlanta.
The Atlanta game,
right? Not the gaudy numbers, but sticking in the pocket, finding some receivers late, showing doing
the hard stuff. Yeah.
So, and then obviously, the Miami game is going to be one because of that comeback late, but he didn't play very well in the first half of the game, right? So it's like that up and down, that ride is what you'd expect. So now going forward, it's obviously got to be more consistent play.
Right.
He's got to be more, I think just consistently accurate on throws that are available to him, right? Like, at the end of the day, just execute, especially when the coach puts a good plan in front of you. He schemes guys open. Let's make sure we're executing and hitting those receivers. I think there's an opportunity to be better at that, a little bit more consistent. But I think a lot of that is just, having the conviction and the understanding of where his eyes are supposed to be and how he's supposed to read through. You got to understand, when we talk about this as a backup, all of a sudden the backup becomes the starter, and it's like, oh, well, here we go. I've gotten 4 reps with the ones like in the last 3 months, and right. So now Will, remember, was hurt, didn't even do the preseason outside the one Chicago game. Was QB 2/3 for the first 8 weeks of the season, and I know they were repping both of those guys with scout team, and they were getting their reps where he could find them. But he certainly wasn't throwing to D-Hop. You know what I mean? Like, that's not part of his process. So there's a lot of catch-up he had to play. At least he had the 2 week with the bye to get ready for Atlanta. Like I said, now he's in a whole different position. The reps going to have his understanding of each concept. So I think some of those things just improve on their own with that understanding. And then the last piece is, he knows he's got to protect the football better. I only threw 3-4 interceptions. I think there could have been
a lot of interceptable balls, right? Though. Like, he got lucky a handful of times. Yeah.
And that's where you love having a guy like D-Hop, who's like, he may not make the play, but he's not going to let the ball get intercepted.
Yep.
Chris Moore took that one like over the guy's head, right? Like, it's nice having receivers that are going to do that for you. And quite honestly, if you are a receiver that does that, you're going to get the ball thrown to you a lot more. So that works itself out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he's very aware of what he needs to do to get better. The best thing is I think it's super fixable, super coachable, and not even like it needs to be fixed or coached. It's just a natural development of
you gotta iron it out,
more comfortable and understanding of the offense for sure.
Man, that's good stuff, Sean. That's because I lied. I have one more question.
It's a
small one. But people like these kinds of things. We saw that he was working with Jordan Palmer out in California recently, getting some reps in with Kyle Phillips out there, because that's Kyle's neck of the woods. Are there, when you've worked with him, any of the Titans guys coming out there and working with you guys?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, so basically, everyone, like I said, has their own plan or however they do their off season.
Sure.
So some guys, I was going to start listing where guys are, but I don't want to miss or misspeak. But some guys will go to where they did their draft prep. So they'll go down to Miami and they'll work out every day and catch balls. And they might not catch it from Will and Malik, but they're catching it from other NFL QBs down in Miami, right?
Right.
But the guys that are in town in Nashville, so that crop of like D-Hop's been around a bunch, which is also cool to see when your number one guy is the one kind of setting the league on being around the other QBs and the other receivers.
Yeah.
And NWI's there a ton because he does most of his offseason out of Nashville. This is where I'm going to just forget names.
Just blank on names.
And I don't is it Reggie Roberson?
Reggie Roberson.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Reggie, all the tight ends. Josh Wiley's been out a ton. Hassan's been out. Chestnut's been out a bunch.
There you go.
Ty J's been out almost every day.
Okay.
Right? With anytime the QBs are throwing, those guys are throwing. I know I'm missing guys. I feel like I've probably seen.
That's a good list. That's stronger than I would have done. I'm terrible with names on the spot, so that's good.
And I'm like trying to picture like, all right, like who were the 12 guys on the field the last time we were out there? And my apologies to anyone I missed. But yeah, no, it's a good like the guys. Like the big deal is like everybody knows where everybody is, right? And Will and Malik, are in constant conversation. So it's not like, like each morning, like, and usually it's been Tuesday, Thursdays, maybe 3 days a week when they throw, they're on a text. Hey, we're going to throw it this time. Maybe we're at Vanderbilt. Maybe we're going to be at TSU today in the indoor because the weather's bad. Hey, we're going to throw at 11. It goes out to all the receivers. Everyone's in town comes, right? It's pretty straightforward, but like, hey,
how's that work? Do you show up to TCU's indoor facility, knock on the door, and say, "Hi, I'm Will Levis. Can I throw in here, please?"
Yeah, so I think that gets handled,
and they just say, "Yes, of course, come on in."
Through the Titan, I mean, I don't know. Last year, Frank, who was the Titan strength coach,
right,
would have a really good working relationship with the strength coach at TSU, and obviously, you have the connection with Coach George, Eddie George there at TSU, and things of that.
Right.
So. Yeah, and Vanderbilt, if you can get NFL players at your facility, you want it. You want the pictures out there. You want the social media. Look where the Titans do their offseason workout. Right here at Vanderbilt. Why wouldn't you want to play here? That kind of thing, right? So, I don't think that you have to twist a lot of arms to make that happen. But yeah, the point is like either the receivers are there working with their QBs because they want to get better, or they know where they are. Hey, Chig's in Miami this week. KP's out in LA. He's going to be back next week, though. Kingsey has been there every day. That's the name. How did I forget Mason? Literally, like,
listen, I think we all could have assumed that he's always around, right?
Yeah, but I just feel terrible. Like there's guys putting in a ton of work. All I know is I don't have to catch, right? So if I'm out there with Malik and Will, there's always 5-6 guys at least out there helping them out, getting their work in. So.
Man, that's so good. We that was worth the price of admission alone. We could end the show right here, but we're not going to. We're going to talk about the young quarterbacks that are coming into the league who are having to do all of this draft nonsense, and they haven't gotten to work out all season long. And we're going to parade them around in Detroit here later this week. So we're going through the top 10 guys. Every year when you get to the quarterback episode, you get worried because some years it's like, oh boy, quarterback 4 through 10. I don't know what we're going to say about them.
Yeah,
pretty decent crop of guys this year. The top 7 or 8 are going to be pretty easy for us to talk about. Mm-hmm. So let's knock out the guys at the bottom of the list, and that's your Cooper Bradleys of the world, your Joe Miltons of the world, your Michael Pratts of the world. If you're a big fan of sexy hair, Sam Hartman out of Notre Dame, it's those kinds of guys.
Yeah.
Before we started the show today, you brought up my number 10 guy, Cooper Bradley.
Carter.
Out
Carter
of
Bradley? Is it Carter?
Or Carter. Sorry, I don't
Yeah.
know where I'm getting Cooper from.
You're
Carter
good.
Bradley. See, like, frankly, that's how much work I've done on Carter Bradley.
We definitely called him Cooper Bradley the entire time when we were at the Senior Bowl, though.
I think that's what it was, which is tough because he was one of like 6 guys there.
To his face?
No, not to his face. Certainly not. That would have been tough. No, so Carter Bradley, deepest apologies to Mr. Bradley, whose father is a coach in the NFL. That's the connection that you may be familiar with. But Carter played down there at South Alabama, was it's unfair to say odd man out, but kind of the odd man out at the Senior Bowl. The one guy that, folks showed up and they're like, I know these other guys. Who's this kid?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's unreasonable to look at his profile, to listen to guys that actually have watched a lot of South Alabama and watched him play and think this guy could carve out a backup role for himself in the NFL if he plays his cards right. He's got a good build, 6'3", 216. Yep. He's 24 years old. He's got a decent arm. He's not a super mobile quarterback, but he's not immobile. He strikes me as your classic backup.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's honestly the classic guy that would play at the level he played at, like a guy who's South Alabama. Shout out to Jim Nagy, obviously, who runs the Senior Bowl and has always done a good job of finding those local to the Senior Bowl players, right? Quarterbacks from South Alabama, North Alabama, some of these underrated guys, and getting them out there and getting them invited. Obviously they do, some of their work so close to South Alabama's campus there for the Senior Bowl week. And, it's a great invite and gives this guy exposure that, he probably wouldn't have, right? Obviously, you said it. If you're drafting Carter Bradley, you understand what his upside is, but you think, okay, he's going to work hard. He's a coach's kid. He's going to understand, you kind of give him credit for things, whether he deserves it or not, that he's going to be really coachable, that he's going to put the time in and watch film and study the playbook. And he's just going to be a really good leader and a coach on the field. And he gets credit for that stuff. But I agree. I mean, a 6'3", 215 guy with a pretty strong arm, that's certainly someone you have to take a look at. I think it's hard. I think when you get to that, like, 5th, 6th, 7th round, like, what is a team looking for in a quarterback at that point, right? Like, what makes them even add a 3rd or 4th guy to their team at that point, instead of just, we'll worry about this next year and let's find maybe a depth player at a skill position that maybe will contribute, quite honestly, a lot sooner. I can really wrap my head around rounds 1 through 4, what I'm looking for, how that fits my system. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a backup that can potentially start. Once you get to the late round guys, I don't know. It's interesting. I think team to team, you'll find something different. There'll be a coach who just thinks that's the perfect guy to round out what they have on their roster. And, is Carter the guy over, some of the other guys we want to talk about here in a minute? I'm not sure. But it'll be interesting.
Now, moving on to a guy who kind of the opposite of what Carter Bradley is.
I'd say the opposite.
The absolute wild card quarterback in this draft, who was also at the Senior Bowl, Joe Milton. Is such an interesting prospect because you saw it at the Senior Bowl. Yeah. This kid can throw the ball farther than the entire football field.
Over them, there are mountains. Really, genuinely can.
processing where to throw that football is the biggest thing for him. And that is why there have been so many people who think that he is a late 6th or 7th round, or maybe will even go undrafted. But based on the arm talent alone, is there something there that a team might want to look at?
I don't know. I just don't. You know what I mean? I just don't know. Like,
that's so fair. It's totally fair.
Man, it's fun to watch him throw at the combine, right? And like I wanted to see him put Xavier Worthy out there and run his 4.22 40 as far as he wanted, and Joe just throw it 90 yards. Like,
it's definitely what Mike McDaniel would probably want out there. He probably wanted that matchup.
You stole my thunder. That's the fit for him. That's the fit. That's the perfect fit. You draft him as the Dolphins in the 6th, 7th round. Yeah. You have him come in when Tua, you've gotta, it's the end of the first half, and you just tell Tyreek, run down there, find the ball, catch the ball. Joe, throw it 90 yards and put as much air on it as possible. That could work. Yeah. It could work.
It's definitely going to entice. Like, you can't help but be wowed. And it's almost like the Anthony Richardson effect from last year. Now, Anthony's a much better player, better all around quarterback. But like, when you walk in the room and you see this guy who's bigger than like your strong safety and your outside linebacker,
6'5", 240,
and he's a quarterback, and you just watch him throw once. But you see, you see it at the combine, like, he's missing outs, he's missing curls. You see his pro days all over the place, and it's just, that lack of consistency, even at the lower end of the draft cycle, the late round, then there'll always be the question: does he fix somewhere else? Can he be a tight end? Can he
tight end?
Back? Like, that's tough. I think it's a really tough evaluation. If it's me this year specifically, I don't even know if he's in my top 10. Despite all the talent.
Sure.
Even a guy like Austin Reed out of Western Kentucky is more intriguing. Obviously we talked about Carter Bradley, Michael Pratt, some of those guys down there at the bottom.
Yep.
Devin Leary. Yeah. I mean, like, certainly, like, no one will question or compare the talent between the two, but from a translatable skill standpoint, I think Milton's going to be a tough sell.
I think he's getting drafted, and it's not that he should. I just think it's killer curiosity. He is. Yeah. You can't tell me every single team in the league has a contingency of coaches. They're just dying to see if they can fix something about him. So, like, it's too tasty to not try. I think somebody's going to convince their GM. It's the 6th round to say, hey, we've got 3 7th round picks. Okay. Half of these are comp picks we don't even need anyways. Let's just do it. Let's just burn one on the guy and see what happens.
Here's the funny thing, that you draft a QB. If you draft them, you're keeping them on your 53.
You'd imagine.
Almost exclusively the way that works.
Right.
Now, the rules have changed a little bit, and you get that little QB3 rule where he's on your 53, and now they changed it again where, he can be on your practice squad, you can still bring him up. So maybe that gives you a little bit. But remember, practice squad is not protected. So you're going to draft the guy in the 7th round.
You're going to protect Joe Milton every week.
Yeah, or you not. And then the teams that didn't draft him, who were just going to sign him as a UDFA, can take him anytime anyway. So, like, you almost have to – I think that's a big commitment. We're going to talk about this at the end of training camp. We do it every year. Like, are the Titans going to keep 3 QBs? Are they going to keep – who's the odd man out? Are they going to put someone in a practice squad? What are they going to do with it? Yep. Well, that's what every other team's going to have to do. And to decide now that Joe Milton is on your 53-man roster, I don't know. Or you say, no, we'll see, and maybe we don't care if we cut our 7th round draft pick loose. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Fair enough. Let's go to my number 8 quarterback here, Michael Pratt out of Tulane. Yeah. 6'3", 220. He's got the build you're looking for. He's not going to wow you with his arm talent, but he does have really strong fundamentals. He's in that Bradley mold of a strong, well-rounded quarterback who doesn't have a particular trait that pops off the screen to you, but he's got enough polish and enough good, B minus traits where you're like, we can have this guy and utilize him as a fail-safe.
Yeah. He's like the small school guy this year that I think people see a lot of promise in, right? Sure. Like, not that he's Jimmy Garoppolo or, Trey Lance or, that kind of thing, but he's like, hey, this guy, he plays the position at a high level, makes good decisions. I like the way he throws the football. He's a guy that mechanically, I didn't love the way he threw against the combine, but I think, from what I'm hearing is that's what he's been focused on a lot in his draft prep process and just trying to fine tune some things mechanically. But yeah, he's a guy you pop on his film and there's a lot to like. And then you got to do the old, well, how does that compare because of the competition he played versus what we're seeing from the other guys? And, and that's the thing that seems to confuse coaches and GMs and decision makers every year is how do you make that comparison? How does that translate from the lower level to the NFL? And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. He's an absolute gets drafted guy. To me, he's like a 5th round guy, but this is a year where like every single quarterback that we're going to talk about today could be drafted a round and a half higher than I think they should. Right. And so I think it's very clear to see maybe if we say Pratt's the 8th best quarterback this year, that might be a 3rd round, 4th round guy this year. Right. Which would be interesting. But yeah, no, he's a guy, like I said, more because we were talking about ceiling and floor all the time. I think Pratt's a guy that you like where his floor is at. And you feel like he comes in, and if he's more or less exactly what you saw in college, he can be, a solid QB2 type for a team that, just needs a little depth there.
Now, you talk about something really interesting about how we might see some of these quarterbacks go a lot higher than where they are consensus. And I know this is where we're going because I know I can just read your mind. I know who's going to be at your number 7 right there.
Where's he on your list, JT? That's the question.
He's number 5 for me personally.
Okay. All right.
Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, man.
Yeah.
I do think that people will be surprised, but I think there's a very good chance that he finds his way into the late 2nd round for one of those teams who has maybe a quarterback entering a bridge scenario. But I think there is a lot of things to like about Spencer Rattler. No, it's not just because I'm a Gamecocks fan. I do think that
I didn't even know that. I didn't know that actually.
I do. Funny. Yeah. My brother goes to South Carolina. So cool. The past 2 years I've been frequenting the live Spencer Rattler tape. But
what he does is he goes out there and he tailgates with all the guys like you do. And then I get some unhinged in-game texts with no context. I should go back and find him where he's like, Xavier Legette is the truth in all caps. Hey, Spencer Rattler is an NFL quarterback in all caps. They may or may not be sober takes, but they are takes.
The best scouting info you can get. You saw it live with his own eyes.
I mean,
he saw it live. Perfect.
Despite him only playing a couple series in the Senior Bowl, I think there is some merit to him being the Senior Bowl MVP that week. I do think that when you think about arm talent between those 3 middle guys, which is Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and Spencer Rattler, I think he rivals all of them. I think the biggest thing for him that is really needing to be worked on is just more of the processing skill, which I think is something that he's not going to have to do right away because I don't think he's going to have to start right away. Obviously, I think if you threw anything better than what the South Carolina offensive line threw out there last year, I think we would have been able to see him process a lot more in that. And, we could have this conversation where he is up in that talk of a Bo Nix or Penix range, but there's so much upside, I think. And, for the journeyman career that he seemingly has already had in college to still
get an early start
still persevere through that, I think is something that also deserves some credit.
Yeah. I mean, he's such a weird study because there's a reason that in 2021, he was the next year, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And then in 2022, they said it again, right? Like 2 years in a row, he was the Caleb Williams next year, right? Yeah. 2 years in a row. Now, that didn't come out of nowhere. That's because people saw his talent, his arm talent. I agree with you. I think he's second to only Caleb Williams from an elite arm talent standpoint.
Wow.
Right? Like that's where I think he ranks. Now, I don't think he's the 2nd best quarterback, but from like a elite talent, thrower of the football with like an adaptability, arm angles, being able to, go right and flip his hips and throw all those fun things we like to see, right? He's second to Caleb Williams, in my opinion. Now, how did he go from being the absolute, no doubt about it, he's the number 1 next year, and then we're drafting Kenny Pickett instead? how did that happen over these next? And we know what happened to Oklahoma, and then it hasn't been consistent enough at South Carolina. It's like we talked about Will, but man, you see the flashes there. You see if I can get a little bit more of that more frequently.
Hey, maybe that's the take. Maybe even after he got superseded by Caleb that year, he should have just come out in the draft anyways.
I mean, honestly, like
he might have gone around the same area.
I was just going to say, I bet a lot of teams are going to draft him exactly the same way. Like they didn't need to see. This is the funny thing. We talk about this all the time. This isn't just like traits and production. This is like the reality. Say Caleb Williams went 3-9 this year. No one cares. He's going to get drafted. He's the best quarterback in the draft.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. Now, if he went 15-0 and won the Heisman again, okay, then great. We love that too.
I mean, Drake Maye went 0-2 in his college career to Virginia, or no, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. Georgia Tech, yeah, and then he's still getting drafted where he's drafted.
At some point, we'll realize like these are the same guys, regardless of their record, even like regardless of how many interceptions they throw or how. That's the funny thing, right? Like we wouldn't love it if Caleb, threw more touchdowns or more interceptions than touchdowns,
right?
Or if he was a 55% completion guy. I'm not saying we'd like, oh yeah, he's still great, but he's still the same guy, right? Like. So we got to fix it. Anyway, that's a long way around the life with Spencer. Yeah, I mean, he is who he is. He's somewhere between the guy who didn't play consistent enough on the field and the guy who was no doubt about it from an arm talent thrower was going to be the number one pick 2 years in a row. He's somewhere in between there. And I think there will be, to your point, JT, coaches and GMs and teams that would rather see the potential upside of a guy like Spencer than Bo Nix or Michael Penix, and you're gonna find out I'm not as high on JJ McCarthy as others too. No one's gonna take Spencer Rattler over JJ McCarthy. Let me be on the record.
Sure,
but is there a higher upside potential if I can get Spencer to where he could possibly be? Then yeah, there's a higher upside potential than there is in a guy like McCarthy. So
it seems pretty clear to me, man. I think the league likes him a lot more than most folks outside of the league do. And I'm with you, JT, that it would not shock me one bit if he was the 5th or the 6th quarterback off the board, went in the second round. I think what for better or for worse, a lot of the folks in the league making these decisions see him as a guy whose game may actually translate better to the NFL. Like he may have a better NFL style game than the way he played in college, a really mature way that he approaches the game of football. They're just like there's some inconsistency there that is showing. But you bring up the offensive line situation in South Carolina, about as bad as it could be. So I am intrigued to see where he goes and where the league reveres him. That brings us to the other two guys who, we entered the draft off season with the conversation of like, okay, it's Caleb and it's Drake and it's Bo Nix and it's Michael Penix, because these are the guys that at the end of the college season are all right there in their conference championship games and in the playoff. And then it becomes pretty clear you get to the Senior Bowl. Jayden Daniels becomes the MVP. The JJ McCarthy hype train just starts chugging down the track. Suddenly these guys separate from the pack a little bit. They fall back into likely to be late first, early second round draft pick guys. And my number 6 guy is Michael Penix, who I would have told you 2-3 weeks ago he was I liked him better as a prospect than I did Bo Nix. But the reason why I have him a notch below Nix is because as I'm studying the other players on this Washington offense, going back, watching the tape, in particular, watching these wide receivers, watching Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk and all these guys play on tape, it's like those guys made him right a lot. I think there's a lot of merit to the idea that like deep ball accuracy might be a wide receiver stat just as much, if not more, than a quarterback stat. And Michael Penix has the arm to get it down there. Don't get me wrong. If he goes to a team like the Raiders and he gets to play with a guy like Devontae Adams, who you can just chuck it up there and let him go get the ball, it may really work. But man, the age, the injury concerns, what do you make of Penix, who's kind of a weird prospect to suss out?
Yeah, very strange, especially if you saw like the perception of him as a quarterback. We'll talk about this with Jayden Daniels too, but like throughout his career.
At Indiana, yes.
Yeah, like, had some highlight moments. At Indiana, he showed a little bit more athleticism. Remember, had that crazy 2-point conversion against beat Penn State. Like, and then, of course, injury, and then another injury, and then the shoulder. And, he's a top 3 thrower in this class. Like, he doesn't have the elite talent that we talked about in Caleb and Rattler, but he's a pure kind of like just like big body, like high performance thrower is the way I think about him, like a Ben Roethlisberger type thrower, right?
Right.
So yeah, so when you're looking at QBs, I want to see a QB throw the ball well. Penix jumps right off the page at you. And I think he's also probably one of the best intermediate throwers in the draft class. You know, will attack the middle of the field. I think him and Drake are two guys that actually attack the middle of the field and have conviction to pull the trigger there. So there's a lot to like with Penix, but to your point, one, because of the defenses they play in the Pac-12. And your point about all the great talent he had around him that he most likely won't have wherever he goes, then how does that translate to the NFL? So you do the injuries, and I know he's been healthy for 2 years, but you're talking about multiple ACL, you're talking about the shoulders, you know, and he's going to get hit more. We talked about this with Bryce Young last year. He's going to get hit more in the NFL than he's ever got hit in college.
By bigger, stronger, faster guys. Yeah.
So guys that have gotten hurt frequently, you know, this was a knock on Levis. This was a knock on Bryce. You saw it with Anthony Richardson last year. It's going to be a knock on Jayden Daniels with some of the hits he takes at college level. So yeah, so then a guy who's had injuries as well, it's concerning. So that's my thing with. And I like Penix better than Nix. So I know we're going to talk about Bo next, but like to me, I have Penix slightly ahead of Nix because I think he's a more classic stand in the pocket thrower of the football. I think teams will value that a little bit higher. But yeah, like I think in a normal year, these are like second round guys, right? And you're feeling pretty good about getting the Bo Nix or a Michael Penix in the second round, maybe the top of the third round. Is like a guy you trade up for to, you know, at the top of the third to grab him. Excuse me. I'll let you go for a second.
Sure. While you catch your breath there, the one thing that I wanted to bring up is we saw, you know, a pretty impressive display in his 40-yard dash at his pro day. He caught everybody off guard. Like, where was this?
Yeah,
he can scoot like that. What was it on purpose? They weren't using him that way. What do you make of that?
Well, I think two things. I think one, I don't know what we decided that actual number was. Like there was some like
maybe a little juice
that came out, but then I saw like some official was more in the 4.5, higher 4.5 range. But my thing is, does he actually play that way? And he doesn't. So for better or worse, whether he can do it or he can't do it,
he doesn't.
He doesn't play that way.
Yeah.
And so to me, I just write it off as that's not what he does. You know, like now unless a team's going to design, you know, QB sweeps and things like that to utilize it, it's not instinctive to his game the way it certainly is with Jayden, the way it was with Malik, the way it is with even a guy like Bo Nix who will use his feet kind of more strategically in the way he plays the game. Yeah, that's just like a little asterisk, cool note about a prospect to me, but I don't look at him as like a guy who ags with his legs.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take a lot more of things into account with a Michael Penix, like you said. The age is up there, just like a Bo Nix, but the injuries are there. That's something that simply Bo Nix doesn't really have to his game right now, and that can offer maybe a more secure floor. And I think that's why some people have Bo Nix as a higher prospect. But I think I'm right there with you. It's so razor thin between those two. I think it will just come down to what style a team might want to pursue when drafting in the second round. So I think that leads into an interesting kind of conversation about Bo Nix of what really differentiates him from Michael Penix.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. He's not as good of a thrower, right? I like him. I think he does some things mechanically that are good. He's consistent. Obviously, that completion percentage was off the charts this year, right? Now it's aided by what they're doing offensively.
Yeah, how far is he thrown down the field? Let's not look into that.
Like, obviously, if you know, he's real high screen percentage and things of that nature. But my thing with Bo is he lacks an elite arm, right? Like I think when you see him throw, you know, I put McCarthy in this boat as well. Like they don't have elite arms, and so you see them have to really struggle to get the ball to the outside, push the ball down the field. You know, he'll throw it up in the air, you know, and just like have someone go run for it. That's a part of his game. But sometimes that's something that comes easy to a guy that doesn't have the intermediate arm talent to make other throws. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. So if I'm trying to, okay, what box does Bo Nix check? Not elite arm talent. He's not like elite athletic. He's not like a Jayden Daniels in this class, right?
Right.
You know, he's not like super great decision making. He's been a guy who's turned the ball over. He's been a guy who's fumbled.
So what do you hang your hat on?
That's the thing, right? And now guys are going to love the experience. Guys are going to love the he's got a higher floor because of how long he's played.
Right.
We talked about Spencer Rattler and said like, hey, there was something about the fact that people thought 3 years ago he could have been the number one. Well, if you look at that way, you also got to look at, well, what is it about these other guys where they literally can't get out into the draft until they're out of the college eligibility? Right? Like, I'll make this case with Jayden, not with Jayden, with Jayden Daniels.
With Jayden Daniels.
Just like I would have made the case with, Kenny Pickett or some of the other guys in years past where and it's not so much like they only had one good year, and that is a part of it. I think Bo's had two. I think you could say Daniels has had two.
Sure.
1.5, right?
Yeah, there you go.
But if guys were heavy talent and really had a lot to show, those are the guys like Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams are like, you can't wait. When are they coming out? If he could come out now, he'd be the number one, right? We do that every year. Like you have to wait until he's actually eligible to come out in the draft. So I think there's that borderline between experience, like a Bo Nix or a Sam Hartman, but you have to measure that with like, okay, but why could they not? Like if Bo Nix could have gotten drafted anywhere in the top 4 rounds last year, he would have come out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He didn't because he knew he didn't have a shot to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So now here he is. So is he a much different player this year than what he was last year? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's like I said, to me, Nix and Penix are like classic QB, like second round, third round type guys to me.
Right. They're go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm going to say, but are they going to get drafted in the top 20? Maybe.
Bingo.
Right. So, and we talk about this every year. Every year is different. It's all about what teams need QBs, not how good the QBs are. We talked about, we've talked about Levis because we're on this podcast. I thought Levis was the 4th best QB last year.
Right.
And I thought he was a second. I thought he got drafted appropriately, in my opinion. My pre-draft evaluation where he got drafted, I thought was an appropriate place for them.
Okay, so that's an interesting conversation, though. So, like, if you merge the classes, is he in this tier right here with Nix and Penix, or is he was he a better prospect than those guys?
I think I have him above McCarthy for sure.
Okay,
and I think I have him above maybe Drake Maye, possibly.
Whoa, okay, we're gonna get into that. Wow,
but isn't that interesting? Like,
it is interesting.
I haven't changed my opinion. I think Levis was properly drafted where he was last year. I also think he's maybe, in my opinion, better than McCarthy as a draft prospect coming out.
Okay.
And then I think you could argue, where he is with Drake.
All right, so let's get into these top 4 guys. You keep alluding to where you have these guys ranked.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to Caleb. Like, it's no secret. We all think he's the best one. I think objectively is the best one. Yeah. It's just a question of how good is he really? Like, where does he fit in the pantheon? Is this a guy that you can actually throw generational labels on, or is that? We'll get to all that. Maybe pump the brakes there. To me, and maybe you see it differently, and I'd like you to spell this out. For me, it is of these top 4 guys. It's 2 pretty clearly defined tiers of 2 guys. I think that Caleb and Drake are in one conversation, and JJ and Jayden are in a different conversation. For me, you talk about where you would draft these guys.
Okay.
Personally, I would not draft any of these quarterbacks besides Drake Maye and Caleb Williams in the first round. That's me. I think that Jayden and JJ are more late first, early second guys. And the reason why let's talk about Jayden first here. Sure. The reason why he, for me, is the 4th guy has less to do with me being high on JJ. I'm not really. It's more that I'm just low on Jayden. You talk about a guy who played a lot in college, played up until he ran out of eligibility. He's 24. He's going to be 24. He is 24 years old, I believe. Yep. He played at Arizona. He may be the guy in this draft that's of the highest profile, that if you ask the average person, where'd they play in college? I don't think a whole lot of people realize this guy played a lot at Arizona before he came to Louisiana State University. And so he comes and plays on a really, really good team. Like, there's a reason he's got 2 of his wide receivers that are going to be drafted in the first 20 picks. There's a reason why next year, both of his bookend tackles are going to be top 15-ish picks. A decent situation over there. And when you watch him on tape, man, like the movement skills are there. You hear people throw around Lamar let's relax on that. Yeah. I think the Lamar Jackson is the silliest comp I'm hearing regularly. His running style is like, it's a little bit of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, where it's like he wants to run like the Roadrunner. I heard, I think it was Nate Tice who said he's got a little bit of Johnny Knoxville to his game, where he's got a frame that doesn't really, you don't want him getting beat up like that, but he runs bigger than he is, thinks he's bigger than he is, and gets tossed around. He's got really nice movement skills. But when you look at the charting and the amount of pockets he bails from, you could argue he's kind of like a one read and run merchant. What is there to like about he won the Heisman? He had a very good year. I think he's a fool's gold kind of guy, and he might be the number 2 pick in this draft.
No. So I agree with you.
That's a lot. I'm sorry. That's a lot.
No, you're good. I'll take it north. Like because I probably undervalue, or at least to the consensus opinion, I'm much lower on all of these guys, even Caleb to some extent.
Okay.
Although let me start by saying I think Caleb is head and shoulders above everybody else in this draft.
Is he a top 5, top 3 pick in any draft? Like he's worthy of a pick in that range?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Okay. Although I also don't think he's like the greatest quarterback since whoever. You know what I mean? Like
Montana,
I think he's about where Trevor was just a couple years ago. Like no doubt about it. QB1.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor hasn't been incredible since he's been in the league, right? He's had his moments of up and down. So I don't like people that want to say Caleb is the best since Andrew Luck or somebody. I don't know. Maybe I just don't go back far enough to be able to think that way. But so anyway, we'll get to Caleb in a minute. Okay, so after that, then I think I agree. Like I don't know that Jayden Daniels, was a better prospect than like a Justin Fields coming out.
That's how I feel.
A guy that played at a high level, played from the pocket. I think Justin was a better thrower in college.
Their styles, there's a lot of overlap there, man. There's a lot of overlap with those two.
Yeah. Now Justin didn't run like Jayden in college, but he can, like we've seen it in the league, right?
Exactly.
So from a skill set, they're probably similar. So it's the thing. So like, the people arguing that Jayden can be QB1 in this draft, but that think Justin Fields stinks. Right? It's like, okay, like let's maybe measure that a little bit. I think that the question about Jayden and Drake, because I think those are the two that most guys seem to compare, right? Like who's going to be 2? Who does Washington want? That kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's going to be very much just team coach specific. Like, do you want an offense that's going to look the way it'll look if Jayden Daniels is your quarterback? Or do you like the way an offense looks with, Drake Maye, big pocket passer,
And that's when it's a tough situation when you've got Cliff Kingsbury in the room. That's when you don't want Cliff around, but unfortunately he is. And so that's the kind of thing that is going to inform that decision.
And I don't know it's bad. Like it's Anthony Richardson last year. The Colts, if they had picked 1 through 12, they were going to do whatever they could to get Anthony Richardson.
Sure.
Because, Shane Steichen, who obviously come from Philadelphia with Jalen.
That's what he
wanted that guy, right?
Yep.
Like he was going to draft Anthony Richardson. He would have taken him over Bryce and CJ. If no other team maybe wanted Anthony Richardson, I don't know. Like I'm sure somebody did eventually, but he probably would have dropped a lot further. So it's not right or wrong. It's not like overdrafting, underdrafting, or who's better or not. Sometimes it's just what does that GM, head coach, offensive coordinator, how do they envision what their offense, what they want it to look like, and who fixed that bill. So I think a lot of people that are maybe mocking Jayden Daniels to Washington is for that reason. They go out and get Mariota as their backup. All right, so that maybe that gives a little hint to what style he just came from Philadelphia, what style maybe quarterback we want our guys to look like, how they play style. Maybe that's a hint. Maybe Kingsbury feels like he can get the most out of a high athletic guy who can make plays with his feet and add that to the offense. But Jayden, I think, is a smooth, efficient thrower. but I don't think he has an elite big arm. And obviously the frame combined with the way he seems to, like Lamar Jackson, even Malik, to his credit, those guys never really got squared up. Like you watch them in college, those guys rush for 1,000 yards. They just never really took one. They make a little juke. They kind of fall to the side. Like where Jayden Daniels is getting hit like I would be if I was playing college football, right? Like with no ability to make anybody miss is what it feels like sometimes. And so similar to Bryce, because of his size and his frame, that's cause for concern. With Drake, I think he's similar to Penix, where he's like a big, powerful thrower. Although I think Penix is more refined, more consistent, obviously. I think a lot of Drake's problems are footwork, and I think a lot of that is kind of the system he was in at North Carolina, some of the coaching he got there. So that's fixable for sure. But when you watch him like at the combine and his pro day, and you're still seeing a lot of the things that you thought would have been addressed through this process and still aren't, it gives you cause for concern. Everybody says Drake's, man, if you could just Jordan Love model Drake, then you have a guy. Yeah, of course. That'd be like every quarterback in the draft, right? I'd love if you could get drafted in the first round, not play it down for 3 years, and then when you're ready. I think that's such a unique situation that probably isn't going to happen again anytime soon. And if
you are choosing to enter the draft, you're about 30 years late on that.
And if you're thinking about that's what this guy needs, then I don't know how you also decide, well, then he's a top 3 pick for us.
Right. Maybe he needs to go back to college, perhaps. Maybe that's.
I would have loved to see Drake one more year of college.
So? Okay.
I mean, I think he would have answered. Now, if I'm Drake, I'm not, because I'm gonna get picked second anyway, right?
Sure.
So
Yep.
Yeah. So I get why he didn't, but yeah, if I just cared about getting the best quarterback when they come to the draft, then yeah, I would have loved to see one more year of Drake developing at the college level for sure.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about Drake Maye, I still think that the pocket presence that he has does kind of value him as that other guy in the first round there that I think I really would take. I see him as, you bring up a very interesting conundrum there in Washington between Cliff Kingsbury and what he foresees for an offense, and then Adam Peters running this more like a business and seeing what he wants for this offense. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Who hired Cliff? Who hired Cliff? Get him out! What are you lost when you hired Cliff? I'm sorry.
I mean, I think it's going to be a really interesting when whoever gets picked at that second is going to be just the linchpin in this entire thing blowing up in our faces on Thursday, and I think that's going to be really, really interesting. Let's talk about
real quick. What I think about a ton in this conversation is like, imagine the other teams in the division when you're watching other teams in your division draft quarterbacks. So last year, when you're a Titans fan or a Jaguars fan, man, like you saw CJ Stroud go and Anthony Richardson go into your division. No matter what you thought, you're like, this year, like if I'm like an Eagles fan, I can't wait. Like I don't care who they draft.
Bingo.
Go get them, Washington. I'm hoping the Giants decide they want a quarterback and they trade up to get one of these 4 too. Like if I'm an Eagles fan, right? Like take like.
I half agree with you. I half agree because if they do what we think they're gonna, like if I'm an Eagles or a Cowboys fan and Jayden Daniels is the second pick, I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked about that. If the Giants go up and get a JJ McCarthy, I'm so stoked. I'm not stoked if either of those teams end up with Drake Maye because I'm clearly higher on him than you are, and we'll get into that in a minute. But generally speaking, I get what you're saying. That's a good way of framing it.
Yeah, it's just like and that's where I maybe undervalue the class. I think of it in that perspective. Like I think these guys are going to be overdrafted this year.
They always are.
Maybe you hit on one. Yeah, but when they're overdrafted and then they seem to, I don't know. Maybe you're right. They're always overdrafted.
Like Kenny Pickett went at number 20. You know what I mean? Like,
but if he had gotten the Jordan Love 3-year model, he would be, just he just didn't get the time he needed.
Yeah, the league screwed him. It wasn't his fault. It was his situation.
That's the way it goes.
So I'm really glad that you're on this show right now because it's the first day of officially draft week. And I loved how you said that you're not high on JJ McCarthy at all, because that's where I was a month and a half ago. And then people on the show continued to gaslight me into believing that he was worthy of a top 10 pick.
Good player.
And I'm
JJ
glad
McCarthy.
that I'm
Good
glad that
player.
I'm being I'm returning back down to earth here, because
Right.
I just
Vindicated.
we've talked it. We went to the combine. We talked to everybody there was to talk about. We just went up to them with microphones and said, "What is there to like about JJ McCarthy?" And it was between, just having Jim Harbaugh as a coach, like that is obviously a big thing to people in the NFL.
He wins, baby. He just wins.
He's a winner.
He's a winner.
He's not afraid to throw over the middle of the field, which I do think is a part of his game that I like. Okay, like you can throw over the middle. That's great. But there's just so much for me in his game that makes him not worthy of that top 10, certainly top 15, in my opinion.
There should be a study done. It's like the earlier in the conversation somebody tells you how many wings he has, the less you should think of him as a quarterback, right? Like ask me about Caleb Williams. Man, his arm talent, he just jumped, his decision making, he's a natural born leader. He's, okay, tell me about JJ McCarthy. He won a lot. But like Stetson Bennett,
3 losses since high school. Yeah. The dude's a winner, man.
This was the Desmond Ridder argument. Oh, he just won a lot. Stetson Bennett won a lot, right? Like no one thought Stetson Bennett was a guy you should trade up for to get at number 4.
No.
So
no, but the infuriating part of that is that's not the argument coming from Michigan fans. That's not the argument coming from media analysts who are like, I love JJ McCarthy, and here's why you should like him too. It's what we're getting from the league. That's it. And maybe it's all smoke. They're just blowing up our asses. But like, dude, the fact that it seems pretty clear a lot of teams in the league actually value with a straight face, guy's a winner. What are we doing?
The problem is there's 7 teams that need a quarterback. Not like could use one, not like literally like right now don't have a QB1 for next year. And I'll include like Denver in that conversation, right?
Denver like, and the Raiders and the Bears
like can the Raiders start, Gardner Minshew? Sure.
Right.
They can, but he's not really a QB1. Can Denver start Stidham next year? Sure, they can. Right? Like, that's right. Everything's changed now.
Can the Vikings rock and roll with everybody's favorite? I can fix him, but
they can, but like that's
they could.
The difference. So when 7 teams need a quarterback, then that 4th quarterback looks incredible right now. And I mean, that's the truth. And because I can't, what am I going to do? Am I going to wait and am I going to get stuck with the 7th best guy? Now if it's Spencer Rattler, you might end up being better off, but no, that's the hard part. So I think, I think when people are like, okay, we need to have a quarterback, we need to get one this year. Our best chance to have a guy with any chance is a first round type guy. He's got to at least be one of the top 4 guys.
Right. Well, and look at next
McCarthy,
year.
It's a good year for McCarthy to be the 4th best guy in the draft class is kind of the interesting thing. Guys are going to love him because he's quote unquote pro ready, because he worked under Harbaugh, because he's an under center. Like if you're the Titans from 2 years ago, you love McCarthy because like you've seen McCarthy run the offense. Malik came in, they're like, oh, he's never taken a snap under center. This footwork, we saw that didn't equate to a lot of success when he got put on the field as a rookie. McCarthy would be better at that out of the gate. So it's not that McCarthy would be terrible if you draft him, but then what? So he's a little bit better his rookie year. If he has to start week 6, maybe he looks like he can handle it. But now, it's the Mac Jones conversation. We keep drafting these guys because they're pro ready, and we think they have a higher ceiling, a higher floor, but clearly a lower ceiling. Mm-hmm. And then 3 years later, we're criticizing them because their play isn't good enough. You got the guy you drafted. If I drafted Kenny Pickett or I drafted Mac Jones, I knew that there wasn't a super high ceiling. So don't be surprised 3 years later where he's not winning games for your team single-handedly, right? It's the whole win with or win because of argument.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a team, an owner, a GM, a coach, I would hate drafting a win with guy in the top 10.
Right. Yeah, and there's levels to that, right? Where it's like this guy's probably going to be a guy you win with because of the limited ceiling. But I think your point more specifically is that like drafting a guy that you're pretty confident the best version you can get of him is probably still a win. You know, like Kirk Cousins level.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
This is the best guy in the league you can win with. You might win because of him occasionally, but not consistently. I do see a world in which JJ goes to the right situation and is a starting NFL quarterback, is a good quarterback. Whether whether or not you want to say, well, but he's just going to be a win with guy. I agree, he'll probably be a win with guy.
Yeah.
Like, what is a reasonable expectation for him from a comparison standpoint? Because you've heard Kirk Cousins out there, like a spirited Kirk Cousins is like a pretty lazy,
more
comp,
athletic.
Right.
Yeah. It's a tough one because to me, like the faces that pop into my head are like Drew Lock. Like Drew Lock to me. I love Drew Lock coming out.
I've heard Gardner Minshew as a possible guy.
Makes sense to me. But
I've heard Baker Mayfield maybe a little bit.
Yeah, see, Mayfield to me had way more like talent, like way more upside.
I think I agree.
Right. So, but so if we're naming Minshew and like Drew, we're naming like these QB2 types, right? Like going to start some games for you. Once again,
I mean, I know Daniel Jones is much bigger, but like in terms of ceiling, that level of play where it's like almost, but not quite. It's a tough one. I don't know.
It is. I don't know what the great. I don't think there's any super favorable comp for him, right? And I think that goes back to the problem is like,
right.
You know, it's kind of like the Knicks conversation. What is the thing, the box he checks? Like
no one with a straight face is like Justin Herbert. This guy, no one's saying.
Yeah, that. Man. You just want to give him the ball and let him pick you apart. Like no,
right. This guy's Joe Burrow. If you let him be, no, he's not.
I think to be fair, you can see him do all the high level things you need a quarterback to do if you're going to draft him early. You just see it so few and far between, right? Where like, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels, even Rattler, you get 4 or 5 like highlight plays a game. McCarthy, It's like, maybe I watched all the film and I found like 22 throws where it was like, I saw him do it once.
Mm-hmm.
There's another good thing. It's like you're really reaching to find it. Not that like you're drafting a player on his highlight film. But I think there is something to say about that. Like, how often are we seeing above average high level plays on the field? And I'm not sure you see that with McCarthy.
Last spitball. This is like best case.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott?
Yeah, but Dak Prescott was drafted in the 4th round. Right, so like that's I
think we all agree. JJ's not. Yeah. He shouldn't be a first round pick. That's
the whole conversation.
Yeah.
Where are you on Dak? Like, do you think Dak's a high level top 15 type?
I'd say Dak is like maybe one of the worst guys I think you can win because of, which is ultimately I think that's he's a borderline top 10 guy. Where McCarthy, best case for him, he comes in, he really ingratiates himself in a system. He knows his spots. He knows his guys. He turns into a strong accuracy, a guy that can chop you up a little bit up and down the field, but that's going to take a lot of development on a JJ. So I don't know.
I probably don't see him as talented as a guy like Dak even, but no, listen, you're right. If he goes to the Vikings and he's got Kevin O'Connell in his ear,
right?
Or if he
throw into those weapons
with Sean Payton and fits that style of offense they want to run, but he'll have success and maybe even success early.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I just keep thinking outside of Caleb. I think there's a very good chance, and this is every year, no matter how good we think they are, very good chance 2-3 years later you're drafting a QB again, right? And that becomes the issue every year with these guys.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting because you've heard through this entire pre-draft process that outside of Caleb, Drake Maye is the only other one. What do you think is the true ceiling for Drake Maye in the next level? Then
I'm going to guess it's not a ceiling thing for you, Sean. I'm going to guess it's a floor thing mostly.
Right now, I just don't. He's very inconsistent.
Sure,
I think when you watch his film, he's probably. I'm looking at the names here in front. He's probably the most inconsistent of the top 6 for sure. Right?
Okay.
Like if you took Knicks's first 3 year at Auburn, with his 2 years at Oregon. Then you find out that inconsistency. But in the last 2 years alone, I think Drake's the most inconsistent. He'll make some big throw where he stands in the pocket and fights a defender off and makes a big play, and then he'll miss like a 7-yard spot route, like Durgett, like one hopping, right? Like things you just don't see happen from elite quarterbacks at any level. You see guys that are inaccurate and miss off the fingertip, miss high. You don't see guys like miss by yards, right?
Right.
And you see that all over Drake's film, and it's concerning for sure. Like I said, I think it's footwork. So I think it's super fixable. He's only 21 years old. You know, you're gonna have time to develop this guy in theory.
Just give him the Jordan Love model, baby. Rock and roll.
That's the problem. It's like, who's drafting him and gonna do that? Because we can go down the list of guys who would have benefited from a team drafting them with a clear, concise plan for the next 3 years on how they develop him to get the most out of him, and maybe allow him to sit and do different things and then come out with a product that, you know, could mirror some of the top quarterbacks. Like, there's good guys in the draft every year that way. Is Drake going to get that? That'll be interesting. If he does, he could be really special because of like I said, the highlight stuff you see. Like he might be inconsistent, but he'll do 3 or 4 things a game. He's a tough guy. He stands in the pocket. He's probably, and I know Drake a little bit personally, so I've been around him. Not recently, but years prior when he was first at North Carolina. He's like the best guy. Like he says, you've seen it in his.
That's what you've heard. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Super. So he's the check all the box intangible guy. If you're worried about Caleb Williams, or you heard some things about Jayden when he was at Arizona State, like they were concerning. Spencer Rattler, obviously. Well, Drake's the opposite of all that, right? He's the best guy, the leader that you want, the face of your team. You know, a lot of what I think Titans fans have liked about Levis since he's been there, right? You get that kind of style with Drake,
right?
And I think that goes a long way too. But you know, like I said, I think he's willing to make throws over the middle. I think you see an understanding of how to work through a concept and being on time to like intermediate routes, coming off his first progression, reset into his second, and having the conviction to pull a trigger. You know, something that we talk about a ton with QBs. Are they seeing it and then pulling the trigger when it's there, or are they seeing it and hesitating and for some reason not pulling the trigger? Well, Drake's a guy that, for better or worse, because sometimes he'll put balls in the wrong place, but he'll pull the trigger. So those are the things when you watch Drake where you're like, man, it's kind of like the Rattler discussion. If I can just wrap up those 20 things he does well and see it more frequently, more consistently, and then back to just body types, a big, strong, you know, stand in the pocket. You know, 10 years ago, that's the guy that you drafted. Like, that's what a QB is supposed to look like. Now, obviously, athleticism and some of the different play style has taken over the league a bit.
I think he's more athletic than we'll give him credit for. He can move. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I didn't mean it like, you know, he's
Yeah. I just wanted to make that point clear.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like I said, I think when you see it with him, is kind of like where you see it with Rodgers, like movement in the pocket, you know, being able to avoid pressure, buy some extra time,
creating lanes.
Yeah, his thing's going to be when does he realize like the play's done and not make a big mistake? When do you take the sack? When do you just throw it away instead of trying to power through a defender and make, you know, you've seen some of those bad turnovers on his film. But like I said, I think a good coach is going to say, bring him in, I'll fix that. You know what I mean?
From an offensive, not just the team in general, but the offensive personnel around him. I think I have a hard time discounting the fact that of these top 6 guys, you can argue the inconsistency is the strongest with Drake Maye. But I think you can't argue anybody was in a worse offensive situation than Drake Maye was, not necessarily from a scheme situation, but at least the talent around. I mean, this guy's throwing to Tez Walker as his first. He's number 1 receiver is Tez Walker out there. The offensive line, not particularly fantastic. If I'm Drake Maye, I'm begging for Washington to take Jayden Daniels and for the Vikings to come rescue me, because I think if you put him on a team like Minnesota, where you can't understate the jump from that North Carolina situation to going with the KOC and having, the best receiver in the league and Jordan Addison to throw to
100%.
and TJ Hawkinson and those bookend tackles to play behind, like that's the kind of situation where, and you've heard folks talk about Maye in the context of, well, he's kind of got some Josh Allen things to him where we talk about the two guys coming out in similar ways, that the highs are there, the arm talent is there, the athleticism, the big body, the build is just it's super inconsistent and too much of a gamer at times. And Josh is the rare instance of a guy that came into the NFL, not to a particularly great situation in Buffalo, but still figured it out. Like, he had that it. With Drake Maye, I think the best case is if he goes to a team like Washington, where you're going to have not the greatest situation, going to have to figure it out. And maybe you turn into the guy that was promised by year 2, year 3, like Josh did. It's just, you can't bank on that because sometimes that there's a serious element of luck there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. It's so funny because we know the situation is what most directly equates to a rookie quarterback success, right? We know it not just from scheme and how good the talent around, but ownership and stability, and are they willing to see that guy? You're right. Josh Allen is the test case of if this
he walked the valley of the shadow of death and he came out because he's just that dude.
And so every year it's okay, who's the Josh Allen of this draft class who is going to do that?
Good
and
luck.
We haven't found them yet. The other thing is
they're not usually out there.
Yeah, but who's going to give him that time? Some teams would have seen Josh Allen rookie year, and they would have been drafting a QB the next year. They would have.
You think if Cleveland took Josh that year instead of Baker, they would have given him 3 years to figure it out?
That's exactly right. I mean, Jalen Hurts has made a similar, I think, improvement from where he got drafted. But luckily, Carson Wentz kind of flamed out, and then Jalen was what they had, and it kind of gave him. Remember, every year it was like Eagles should draft a QB, and then they waited one more year. Same with Chicago. I thought Justin Fields was maybe not as quickly, but starting to make some of. Now I get it, but then Caleb Williams.
You can't, right?
And you can't not. But so it's not like no one else has ever made that development that Josh has. But did the team give him the time to keep going? Right. And that's the tough part. Everyone talks about Peyton Manning. What did he throw? 25 interceptions his rookie year.
All the interceptions, man.
There's zero chance. There's no chance a quarterback. If a quarterback throws 6 in his first 2 games, he'll never start another game again.
Right.
It's over. It's done.
Yeah.
No rookie QB is going to be allowed to throw 25. Anthony Richardson would have been last year. I think the Colts got him and said, we are committing to what this development's going to be.
Yep.
And it's, we're going to mold him like Steichen molded Jalen Hurts. And
as
we're
a new coach with a patient GM.
And we'll go 4
ownership.
and 12. Yep, we'll go 4 and 12, and he'll throw 30 picks. And we'll go, 7 and whatever. I forget. We got 17 games now. I can't do the math.
Well, that's an owner that's seen it, right? He saw that with Peyton. He knows what that the dividends that patience pays. So you get that.
But those are rare situations. So if Drake goes there, a situation similar to that, and maybe it is the Vikings with KOC. Because the young coach, they're going to give him leeway.
I think they'd love to. I think if they could handpick their guy, it's not Caleb. I think that's their guy.
So the question
personally.
is, can they get him? Can they find him? How do they get up? Can they get up to 3? Will it still be there at 3?
Yeah.
That's the tough part. But listen, I love watching quarterbacks have success. So I'm rooting for all these guys to find the perfect situation and get the time they need. Just the reality, we just know it's not going to happen.
It's going to be so exciting if he ends up with the Vikings, and it's going to make me shed many tears if he ends up with the Patriots, because I don't think any of these quarterbacks can go to this Patriots team right now. I think whoever goes there is doomed to die personally, but we'll see.
Have you thought about how you think about Drake as a prospect with Levis as a prospect? I know I talked about how I liked them maybe more than the lower round guys, but you like Drake a ton.
Yeah, if I added Drake into last year's pool, I would have slotted him above. Levis would have been the 5th guy for me. I don't think it's leaps and bounds different, because there are some elements of their game that are really similar. They're similarly built guys. Levis is actually a slightly bigger guy.
Sure.
But they're both more on the raw side coming out, but they've got the traits. So it's a similar guy, but I probably would have leaned Maye just because I think ultimately I did see more flash from him. The high end with him was higher than what I saw with Levis in college personally.
Yeah. What's similar too is the way that, obviously their offense and their OC was so much better suited for them. Their second to last year of college,
Totally.
right?
Right.
Both of those guys, obviously with Liam Cohen and Levis at Kentucky, and then with Phil Longo with Drake. I mean, you saw, I think, the best of both Levis and Maye that year before their last year. And then both of those OC changes, both with guys that, I don't think, you said a lot of it's talent. I think a lot of it was, especially with Drake, was scheme. They brought in Chip Lindsey, who had been at Auburn when Stigum was there and had been a Troy maybe as a head coach and kind of bounced around. But I think when you watch just the film and the concepts and the schemes didn't do him any favors. That's interesting. I think Drake and Will, if they were in the same draft class, would have been a very interesting, because a lot of similarities to like how those last 2 years and how you kind of look at everything. And guys that look similar and play somewhat similar as well.
Well, you know what, that sparked a framing in my mind, which is really not along the lines of what you were talking about just then, but you talk about the situation that Maye was in.
Yeah.
I think a good way of looking at it when you're trying to parse between these top 4 quarterbacks, and in particular Maye and McCarthy and Daniels, there's not a question in my mind that if you had put Drake Maye in that situation at Michigan or in that situation at LSU, that he would be with a bullet the second quarterback in this class. I don't think anybody would argue it. And I think if you did the inverse and put either of those other 2 guys in the situation at UNC, I'm not sure we're talking about them nearly as highly as prospects.
I agree. I mean, listen, I'm sure like Carter Bradley and Michael Pratt are saying, man, if we were at Michigan in that system and that was all I had to do, we'd be national champions too.
Give me Neighbors and Thomas Jr. I can throw the rock.
Come on, man. So, no, I think that's right. I think that's always a fun one to do draft wise. Okay, would he have the same success in there if if they switch places? And that's the coolest unknown, but the best way to think about. We do it in the NFL too, right? Like,
you got it.
Does Bryce Young stink and CJ Stroud's incredible? Or, if you flip situation, what would CJ Stroud in Carolina? Probably still better than Bryce. You know what I mean? But you have that discussion.
But it's a part of the equation, whether it's 50% of it or 20% of it. It's some 100%. Percent of it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that leaves us with our top guy in Caleb Williams, who a future Chicago Bear, easily the best quarterback in this class, according to you. Clearly, according to me, I'm imagining JT feels the same way. The conversation we need to have is just like where, and we've already sort of had it, where it's like he's in that tier of Trevor Lawrence, maybe like a false god kind of thing. Because I remember Trevor Lawrence coming out and it was like, he is a generational prospect. And a lot of folks, I think, probably like you and I would push him out. He's very, very good. He's the best quarterback in this class. Generation might be a step too far. With Caleb, that's kind of where I'm at. He's got some things that he does that are truly different. And our buddy over at The Ringer, Danny Kelly, in his draft guide, he talks about it. There's this viral video that I don't expect you to have ever seen, but there's this guy that plays Vivaldi on the accordion. Okay. And it's a viral video because it's just it's a song on an instrument you'd never expect to hear. Okay. And it's incredible when you're listening to it. And his point is the comp is that because you don't quite know what you're watching, but it's fantastic. It's at the top of its craft. And so like Caleb does some things on the field where you see it and it's different than a lot of the things you've seen. And you feel there's a little intrusive thought in the back of your head is like, I've seen Patrick Mahomes do some of these things, but of course we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
But it's those elements of his game where you're like, this guy can be really, really, really special if it all hits, if it comes up sevens.
There's definitely something for seeing a guy do something that you never see anybody else do.
Right.
Like he can literally make a play on the field. He can, escape pressure, spin around, fake a throw.
And then the vision, he sees a guy that he should not be seeing.
And then you can just say, I've never seen another quarterback at big level college football ever do that. Right. I've never seen a guy in the NFL ever do that. I can even say the quarterback my NFL team has certainly can't do that. Mm-hmm. Right? Like when you see that, it's hard not to get enamored with that piece. Now you're right. This goes back to okay, if we just picked everybody's top 30 plays and we did highlight films, you can't just draft off that. Caleb,
they'd all be top 10 picks.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
but some guys would be different than others, right?
Yes.
Caleb Williams' highlight film looks a lot different than JJ McCarthy's highlight film, right?
Yeah.
Now, Zach Wilson's highlight film looked great. Malik Willis's highlight film is out of this world, things of that nature. So it's not that that's the most important part about playing QB, but you do get enamored with those pieces. With Caleb, it's not just the ability, the arm talent to do it. To me, it's the understanding and kind of adaptability in different situations to be able to find a solution, right? We talk about a lot in the QB training and development world. Like we'll do drills and things like that, but really all I'm trying to do is like create a problem on the field, and then the quarterback's job is to solve that problem, right? That's what we're thinking about. So maybe I forced him out to the flat to their left and the receivers cut back across the field. From that point on, you do you. You want to stay on the run and close your shoulder and throw. You want to flip your hip. You want to stand and get stationary, and right, like that's and you're trying to recreate and make it as close to what happens on the field on Sundays as you can. That's the thought process. So Caleb was a guy who would just excel in being able to solve whatever problem is presented to him on the field. And he can do it with different arm angles. He can do it by, showing different levels of different touch throws, has the arm talent to throw it on a rope and get into a tight window if need be. He can buy time and extend the timeline within the pocket, so not just like being able to escape or like pocket presence, but literally like pocket like manipulation, right? Like where to move to help out my tackle, where to buy an extra half a second so that this third route, my progression has time to develop and open up. There's just like you just watch him play, and it's like a high level understanding of how football is played and how quarterbacks need to play to be successful. That's the cool thing. Now, there's also the Superman aspect of his game where
hey, let's play in the structure a little more. Let's do the things that we're supposed to do. Right.
And you see, and this is what we talk about with Drake as well, right? And we touched on earlier. So if I'm a coach, it's a lot easier to pull the reins back in from Superman than it is to ever what's the worst analogy? Make Clark Kent do more special things, right? Like, does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's the way I would think about it. So yeah, I mean, to me, like I said, there's such a separation, such a head and shoulders of where he's at in his game. Like I said, I can say all those things. He still, needs to protect the ball better. Needs to not run himself into sacks and know when the play's over and be smarter about some things there. But I can say all those things and still not be as high on him as some of the rest of the draft world. Like, sure. I think he's CJ Stroud was my top QB last year.
Right.
I think he's better than
good
CJ
take, by
Stroud,
the way.
obviously. Right. Yeah, it worked out. Not that I saw any of that coming, but
No, you did. Don't worry.
Yeah, that's right.
You
right.
did.
Yeah, Mark.
That's exactly what you thought would happen.
Find the tape from last year.
Yeah. Pull it.
Yeah, like he's better than CJ Stroud, but like I said, he's better than 22 draft class. He's better than Kenny Pickett.
You think?
But yeah, but Trevor, that's as far as I go back. I don't think he's Joe Burrow. Like they're so different players.
Yeah.
But he's I don't know. It's so hard to what if Trevor and Caleb were in the same draft class? Who do you pick? Who knows, right? Because they're so different, like the things they do well. And,
I mean, one of those guys was winning national championships, so I think it would have been. I think the fit alone may have made that decision for us.
I think so too. Here's a funny thing, because I'm a Bears fan. I grew up a Bears fan, and obviously worked closely with Justin Fields. So your
opinion on this is null and void, completely invalid, because he's your quarterback now. You're getting off the pod, you guys. We appreciate you too.
You know what? Hey, if JT could be a Mets fan and a South Carolina Gamecocks fan.
You know what? That's a great point. You make a strong point. I need to kick you both off the show. That's what I need to do.
No, but here's the funny piece. I would have argued I liked the way Fields' development was happening in Chicago. And I kind of thought maybe you stay the course and see that play out even over Caleb. Like, I get why that's probably not the smart way to do it.
Right,
but that's where I was. Like, at least had to, make a decision. It was
the timing was brutal. It was brutal timing.
Yeah. So, my point is, if I thought Caleb was a no doubt about it, then you don't think twice about shipping off Justin. So that's where I'm saying maybe I'm not as high on Caleb as I am on others, as other people are. I mean, But yeah, as far as in relative in comparison to these other guys in the draft class, he's got a real chance to be a top 5 quarterback in the league if it all comes together. And there's not another name I see on this paper that you could say that about.
JT, anything to add to that?
I mean, it's hard to say
Caleb,
much else
good.
when you totally agree with everything. It's with the bullet. He's the consensus guy. It's going to be a Chicago Bear in less than 72 hours or so. Is that right on timeline? Maybe
Sounds about right. I think so.
Sounds good to me.
3 days.
Sounds good to me.
But yeah,
I'm sure the guys in Detroit are hoping it comes a lot sooner. So
sure.
Both the guys getting drafted and the people probably covering. I don't know
exactly right. We're gonna start the timer and then
Detroit.
we're gonna have to wait another 10 extra minutes as the clock kicks.
You never know.
How long do you think they make us wait?
Oh,
I mean, you think they're gonna do the whole thing?
For sure.
Gotta.
Is Caleb? I can't remember. Caleb's gonna be at the draft, right?
Yeah.
So he's got to be in the room. So you got to give him a couple of minutes. You got to wait for the phone call to the phone's got to ring. The cameras have to swoop in. Mm-hmm. Remember, that all happens before they even announce the draft pick.
Right.
So, it's going to take some time. Make you guess a little bit.
I can see a world in which the expectations for him, I mean, they may already be out of control.
Yeah.
But like by Halloween, by Thanksgiving, they're really out of control. But just because of the fact that, and this as a Chicago fan, he might be like the best quarterback in the history of the Bears fast. Like, because the bar is so low. The bar is so incredibly low. If he passes for 4,000 yards this year, he'll be the first to ever do it since the Bears were founded in 1874. Like,
when the Bears drafted Justin Fields, it was, oh my God, we finally got a QB. We've never had one. Jay Cutler, whatever. We finally got a guy. And then now it's the next iteration, and maybe this guy pans out the way we thought. The flip side of that is, man, if he's 1-7 out of the gate and he's struggling in ways you didn't expect him to struggle, and you ship Justin Fields off, who was made, I don't know,
but they're doing it right this time. Because remember, Fields comes in and they had signed Dalton, and they did the whole thing where it's like Dalton played a lot, and they didn't. Yeah. That weird dance of, we don't want to put the rookie out there too early when you got a starting or a veteran backup, because if you do and they suck, then people are going to be calling for the backup. The fact that they're
in Chicago, I heard some Tannehill.
It's the kid from last year, the rookie who played a couple games. And wow,
Bagent.
Yeah, Tyson Bagent. Like that's where you want to be, right there. No one's going to be calling for Tyson Bagent, even if they're 1-7.
Yeah,
he's going to get the whole season.
They probably need to bring a veteran QB in too, I would think.
I'd say no.
Kind of have somebody. You say no. I'm not saying.
Would you want what do you mean veteran? Like you want a Ryan Tannehill in there over his shoulder?
I don't know. Once again, I don't. It would depend on. Do you think Caleb Williams is looking over his shoulder, concerned about?
I don't either.
Tannehill? Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what the coaching staff is doing, and I know that a fan base like Chicago will turn on a guy for right or for wrong very quickly.
Yeah. No, you're right. No, perfect situation. Like, it doesn't matter. They're going to give him run. They're going to take the model approach because they have to. Because when you decide to pull the plug on the guy you were developing, you can't just keep doing it at one point, you have to just stick and say, okay, one of these guys we have to give the opportunity for them to reach. And like I said, there's
Let's
no
not forget, less than a year ago, Tyson Bagent came in and played 2 games because Justin Fields got hurt. And there were a lot of people very loudly saying, maybe we stick with him the rest of the year. So if they did that with him,
the next game, and then they were like, "Oh, never mind."
No, exactly. Right. But the point is that you need to have no other options for fans to turn on and just make them ride it out. Make them ride it out.
That was Tommy DeVito in New York, right? Tommy DeVito he should be, and then it was like he played the 4th game, and it was like, "Oh, never mind."
That primetime game, you're like, "Oh yeah, I don't know.
Never mind." Daniel Jones come back, so
exactly.
Like I said, I'm optimistic. There's no reason wwhy Caleb wouldn't have success both
it's a decent landing spot
long term,
by the way, in terms of
like some weapons around him.
The history of landing spots for a first overall pick for a quarterback.
Yeah.
It's among the better. I mean, it's better than where Trevor ended up. Like that Jacksonville team Trevor went to, obviously a wreck.
Yep.
The team that we saw, the Carolina team that we saw Bryce go to last year, a mess. I don't know. And that's the weird thing. Remember last year we were talking about Carolina, like pretty decent landing spot. We had that conversation.
And we would have argued that the Texans was like a worse spot. Like they had no receivers. Who's going to catch the ball, right? So
maybe we're fooling ourselves. But I think Chicago's a decent spot for him.
Yeah, I do too. The head coach, it'll be interesting. Like you'd almost like them to just commit to a long-term contract there with the head coach. And so now, I don't know that he earned it, but like once again, we're just trying to get some continuity and stability. Let's see that thing go for 3 years and nobody be questioning it. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But no, like I said, from a talent standpoint and production on the field, he won the Heisman 2 years, right? It's not like he's a guy that could be good, but we haven't seen it all together. Like we've seen it. Yeah, he's an easy one to bet on for being really good going forward.
All right. Well, hey, we could sit here and we could probably talk for the rest of the evening. But we need to wrap it up for the folks at home that are dying for us to be done. So we're going to be done. Sean, you are one of my favorite guests to have on because it is so much fun talking to you about these guys, and
appreciate it.
It's very easy. You make our show very easy. I don't feel like I have to do a lot of prep ahead of time because you bring the goods every time. What are you up to? Like, I know you're over at Quarterback Takeover. You're working with guys, staying busy.
Yeah. I mean, kind of the whole crew, the Quarterback Takeover crew, is like all kind of spread out. Like Quincy is, Deshaun Watson is doing his shoulder rehab and getting ready, just started throwing himself. Quincy spends a lot of time with Geno Smith down in Miami. So he's kind of been between Deshaun, Geno. We're all in Atlanta, Tyrod Taylor, a couple other local QBs here in Atlanta. We spent a lot of time with, obviously I spent a lot of time in Tennessee with both Malik and Will. We have a guy, Brian Beasley, part of our staff, who coaches Julian Lewis. If people know that name, he's like the number 1 high school quarterback in the country, right? So you got guys that just wherever our quarterbacks kind of need us, and everybody's split up a little bit, and just this is off season time, so it's
there you go.
It's fun, and now we get this little break because guys are back with their teams, and then once OTA's over, we'll kick it back up again in the end of May and all through June and get them ready for training camp. So it's really the best time of year for me.
I believe it.
We're and then we get to put all the work in, and then fall comes around and we just get to watch the guys play. So,
well, Sean, we're definitely going to have you back on in the summer after you've had a chance to work with those guys. And
I was promised pizza and beer if I jumped on the show. So I guess I got to come up.
Next time you're in Nashville, you know how to reach us. You have our phone number. We will treat you to wherever you want to go. I know you come to town.
I'm going to be on site. Is the sponsor still the sponsor? I
don't know. We had a 1-year contract, so we'll see. Maybe next year it is, maybe not, but we'll see. Regardless, we're going to figure it out. We'll make it happen.
Sounds good, man. For sure.
All right. Well, that is Sean McEvoy. He is the guy when it comes to quarterbacks, quarterback takeover, QB developer. That's our show for today, guys. One more live show before the draft live shows, which we'll be doing all of Thursday and Friday night. Rounds 1, 2, and 3. JT and I will be hanging out, eating, drinking, enjoying, reacting to what the Titans do in the draft tomorrow. Mock Draft 2.0. I'm going to inform you all of what exactly is going to happen because I'm already cooking up this mock draft. It is, in fact, 100% correct. So if you want to know what happens on Thursday before Thursday, you'll have to tune into tomorrow's show. Until then, make sure you're reading the Do and Don't Draft guide that is live now on Broadway Sports Media's website. JT and I go through 75 of our do and don't draft prospects and why they would and would not be good fits on the Tennessee Titans. It is your definitive draft guide ahead of Thursday's action. For producer JT, for Sean McEvoy, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow.